Hey, this is Mike, and welcome back to the Happy Truckers channel. In this video, I am going to give you the top 5 reasons you will hate Chicago. If you like this type of content, make sure you let me know by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get into the video. Chicago is one of the great American cities. I love that town. I lived there for 5 years, and I even made a video about why you will love it, but it's not perfect. Here are 5 reasons you will hate Chicago. Number 5, the traffic. Chicago may not be as bad as LA, but it's still pretty bad. When I lived there, I lived in the city, but for a while I worked out in a suburb 35 miles away. It would regularly take between 1 and 2 hours. Add snow and ice and all bets are off. And there never seems to be not a rush hour. It's constant traffic. Luckily, Chicago has a great public transit system. Other than when I worked out in that suburb, I pretty much took the train, the bus, or Uber everywhere. Plus, if you do drive, you have to pay for parking and or risk getting towed. That brings us to our next item on the list. Number 4, taxes and corruption. Taxes in Chicago are outrageous. A study by the nonpartisan Tax Foundation Group found that Chicago has the highest sales tax in the nation at 10.25%. When you add up the sales, the property, and all the other local taxes and fees, Chicagoans are the most taxed residents in any major city in Illinois. A recent study showed that Chicagoans pay 3 times more in local taxes and fees than Naperville residents, which is the suburb I used to work in. Years of corruption, fiscal irresponsibility, and a worsening pension crisis have allowed Chicago lawmakers to turn to taxes and fines and debt to generate the revenue instead of slowing the growth of spending. There's a point where people just can't take it and they leave. Number 3. Segregation. Chicago is incredibly diverse. I love that about the city. And in fact, I mentioned it in one of my top 5 reasons to love Chicago. But it's also incredibly segregated. As a newcomer to Chicago, I didn't really realize this. I worked with a diverse group of people. I rode on the train with a lot of different types of people. But then someone mentioned it, and I started to realize that, yeah, my neighborhood looks a lot like me. The city population is pretty well distributed. Approximately 32% white, 30% black, 29% Hispanic. That sounds great until you realize that all but a very few neighborhoods are quite polarized. You have a neighborhood like Chatham, which is 97% black, while across town, Edison Park is 85% white. There are all sorts of reasons for this, and a lot of them are pretty bad, quite frankly, and they require far more time than we have here to explain. But just know that Chicago has 77 designated neighborhoods, and it's likely the one you like is not going to have as much diversity as you may want. Number 2, crime. There is no way around this. You can spin it and try to downplay it with various stats, but Chicago has a crime problem that is impossible to ignore. I lived there for 5 years. I was never the victim of a violent crime. In fact, I was never the victim of a non-violent crime. But I would be naive to use that anecdotal experience as proof that the reputation for crime is overblown. It's not. Of course, there are certain areas and or activities that will increase your exposure to crime, and you would be sensible to avoid those. However, that being said, I never felt unsafe in Chicago. My wife did not feel unsafe. Were there occasionally sketchy people or times you were on heightened alert? Yes, of course. You can't live around 10 million people and expect them all to be Boy Scouts. But Chicago needs to do a much better job at tackling the problems that lead to and sustain the crime levels that they currently see. And number 1, the weather. You knew this was coming, right? I heard a comedian say one time that Chicago was for people that like New York, but would rather just have more cold and crime. Ouch. That one kind of stings a little bit. Chicago winters are just bad, and I actually like the snow, but it goes on far too long. My wife and I were at a street festival one year, and we took a selfie for Facebook. A Florida friend asked us, "Are you wearing coats?" We were. It was freaking May. One year it snowed in May and then again in October. That's 4 months without snow. I'm from Florida. We have 2 seasons, summer and February. I'm used to long summers and no winter. This is exactly the opposite. It is not always fun. As anyone that has lived in the cold weather state will tell you, The winter just slows everything down so much. We lived across the street from a grocery store. Seriously, it must have been 20 yards away, but it always felt like it took longer to get dressed to leave the house than it did to actually walk over there when it was 1 degree outside. However, if there is a bright side, it's that when the winter is over, Chicagoans embrace the spring and summer like no other. My first year in Chicago, a coworker said, "You are gonna love downtown Chicago when it warms up. Everybody's outside." He was so right. The spring awakening almost makes the winters worth it. Almost. Hey, I really hope you liked that video. Did I miss anything? Let me know what you love or hate about Chicago in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and make sure you ring the bell so you get notified every time we post a new video. Until next time, keep on trekking.